Hello, my name is Jordan and I'm the project leader for the Sprint 2, and I will be talking about the project presentation for Sprint 2 today. Our topic for this project is a calming VR experience. So this is the timeline for our Sprint 2. Sprint 2 starts from week 9 all the way to week 12. Week 8 is the first week, but we had to prepare for the presentation of Sprint 1 and also hand in the Sprint 1 report. So technically it starts from week 9. So between these 4 weeks, we had to come up with creative ideas when we were building the program, and we had to start building on the basic program environment. We managed to finish a second part of the demonstration before week 11. So we finished a demonstration, second version, on week 10, and we also presented the presentation to our project demonstration to our client, where we got a few good feedbacks, such as very good color palette and very good progress, but it's lacking variety, and it gets boring over time. So he suggested that we add more variety to the experience as it progresses. So we managed to solve most of our problems before week 11, but we did not manage to borrow the VR headset from the client 2 weeks prior, which was our plan, so that we could start implementing the VR experience onto the VR headset. But since the other group borrowed the VR headset, we could not, we had to wait for them to return it so that we can borrow it from the client. We managed to borrow it a few days before the due date, so it was a rush, but we managed to finish and finalize the demo. So I will move on to the roles of each members of our group. The first person is George. He is responsible for the first person perspective camera in the second project demonstration, as we did not have the resources, such as the VR headset, to test our program on. So to mimic the experience, we decided to implement a first person perspective camera onto the experience. He also has the research on the shooting object and the projectile. Originally, our plan was to shoot wind objects towards dandelions, so it gives a blowing effect onto the dandelions, but we did not manage to find it, so we used a projectile shot from the controller in the final project demonstration. Move on to the next person, David. He was responsible to create a storyboard from our different opinions. We discussed on how the experience should pan out, and according to David, he has to come up with a storyboard, and we have to follow the storyboard to build our program experience. He is also responsible to researching the assets for the experience, such as the environments in the experience, the trees, the flowers, the grassland. He has to research on those parts, and he has to provide George and I these materials when we are compiling the final project demonstration. We'll move on to me, Jordan. I am responsible for creating a platform and a target where the user will follow a path towards the target at a set speed. I have to keep the speed in mind, because if it's too fast, it might create motion sickness. If it's too slow, it might be too boring. And I also have to research on the physics of the user and the experience, which we did not implement, because since we are only following a path, there's no need for any physics to be implemented on the user. I also have to research on the visual complexity of the experience. It cannot be too detailed, as we are creating a calming experience. So if it's too detailed, the user might not feel calm, and instead it feel more energetic trying to focus on the details in the experience. We'll move on to the next person in the group, Leelaka. He is responsible for researching the dispersion of fragments of the dandelions, so we say. Basically, the main idea of what he is researching is to break down an original object into smaller pieces. This is how we implemented his idea onto the dandelion in the project. And he also did some research on the gravity properties of the dispersed fragments of the dandelions, which we did not implement because it creates more of a feeling of the fragments being blown away instead of blown and falling onto the ground immediately. The next and final person is Peter, who is responsible for researching the background music. It has to match with breathing beats, breathing patterns, so that the user can follow the music to breathe accordingly, so that they can have a calming experience by calming down their breathing patterns. And he also has to research on the color palette. So what kind of colors can stimulate a calming feeling when the user is experiencing everything. So this is our project progress. We've managed to finish our Sprint 1 and Sprint 2 reports in time, and we've also implemented the VR experience onto the VR headset when we borrowed the VR headset from the client. We finished creating a demo and managed to finalize the demo in time. Although we managed to finalize our demo, we did not manage to completely research all of our contents, as we did not manage to find out how to shoot wind objects. So instead of, due to our approaching deadline, we replaced the wind objects with projectiles. And since we've only managed to borrow the VR headset a few days prior to our due date, we did not manage to do many optimizing to our experience. We've just managed to decrease the resolution from 32-bit to 32-bit half resolution, so that it can run on a constant 60 frames per second. So move on to the final version of our project demonstration. Yep, this was recorded by George when we borrowed the VR headset from the client. As you can see, we have a controller on the bottom side of our screen with a white line. That is, the purpose of that white line is to aim at the dandelions for easy aiming. And this was created by George, the shooting of particles from the front of the controller. And as you can see, when the projectile hits the dandelion disperses into smaller fragments. That part was done by Leelaka. How to break down an object into smaller pieces upon contact with the projectile. So all these assets, as you can see, when the user is flying through the experience, the mountains by the side, the ground on the floor, the trees, they are all found by David he has found all these assets and provided George and I these assets so that when we compile it, we can put it into the experience. And the color palettes are all decided by Peter. He managed to find these calming colors, and we also received good feedbacks from the client based on the color palettes. He said the client have said that these colors have been a very good choice. They're simple, and it is a very low intensity, low visual intensity upon the user's eyes. As we progress, we could see, as you can see in the screen, you can more varieties such as a flower will appear, which is interactable. So when the user shoots at the flower, it will float off to the sky. As you can see, the further we progress along the experience, more and more dandelions show up. To optimize towards the end of the experience, we've removed some of the dandelions, and also to prevent further rendering of small particles flying around, we've coded the dandelion fragments to destroy itself between 15 to 30 seconds upon flying off to the sky. The background music is also chosen by Peter. He's seen the experience and he chose this because it matches the speed of the user traveling through the valley, and it also helps with a calming effect of slow beats to help calm the user's breathing patterns. And as you can see, we've reached the end of the experience. This was my part. I had to let the user reach a target, and when it reaches a target, a panel shows up to the user's face and says that thank you, and to exit, press the Oculus button.